Welcome to this week's Feel Good Friday. And this week we have another recovery story from the Secrets to Recovery Live archive. And this week's episode is with Katherine. And the reason why I like this story is it's a good example of recovery not being down to any one single miracle. Recovery has many ingredients. There are different facets and different pieces of the jigsaw which are important in different ways for different people at different times. And I think Katherine's story is a good example of that. So here is Katherine.
Katherine, firstly, thank you for being here. I know that it's often it's a kind of funny thing for people coming back. I know that you did the 90-day program kind of in this kind of room.
Yes, in this room, yes.
Yeah,
and I didn't have as much energy as I do now.
Phew.
Understatement.
That's why you're sat in this chair.
Yeah.
And I know it's kind of quite a funny thing, people kind of coming back to the kind of same building, same space and kind of telling their story. Yeah. But maybe as a starting point, you know, when did you first start? When did you know that something was happening in your life which was not perhaps the path that you had planned? You started to get some signs and symptoms.
Well, it was August 2010 when I got what I thought was a virus. So I'd actually been backpacking for a year, got back in the May, went back to an organisation that I'd worked with before and doing recruitment. And so it was a known entity, really. And then all of a sudden I got a virus. So it was a couple of weeks. It was nasty. Mm-hmm. It was very flu-like. I was hot and cold. I was sweating a lot. It was really nasty. I lost lots of weight. I couldn't eat. Went to the doctors. And they said it's just a virus. So that was a couple of weeks period. And then between that sort of August and the Christmas time, I was dipping in and out of what felt like I'd nearly got flu, but not quite. So it was just always there in the background.
So it was like you hadn't quite
fully
recovered.
I didn't feel I'd recovered, but I couldn't put a label on what was going on.
Yes.
And at that stage, you know, there was no sense that it was going to go on for the amount of time it did.
I understand.
So I just assumed that perhaps I hadn't recovered. I was trying to do all the right things, rest, whatever. Went to stay with my parents at Christmas. My brother and his family came over from Australia, and unfortunately they were, when they arrived, with something completely different. But then I got the same again, and I was really poorly. And in a way, I kind of regressed to childhood because Mum was there to look after me, change the bed sheets, and generally sort of pat the sweat off my brow. And that was another bad period where I was really it was very sort of bad symptoms. So, but I was starting a new job in the January.
Okay, and at this point, did you just assume you had a virus? Like
yeah, sure.
You weren't labelling it as...
No, I just thought, gosh, this flu won't go away, and maybe I've just been unlucky and got flu twice, and it didn't go away properly the first time. So that was a 6-month period of just feeling like that. Then I started a new job in the January, and for that whole year of 2011, which was definitely not my favourite year, I kept having recurring flu-like symptoms, but also my fatigue was starting to get worse.
Okay.
So fatigue in the sense of physical energy. So I was coming home from the new job and then literally going straight to bed. Actually, I was falling asleep on the train on the way home.
Okay. And what kind of work were you doing?
I was doing recruitment, so I was recruiting for law firms at the time. Okay. It was a fairly busy role.
Yeah,
it was a lot of juggling, so client-facing, so meeting candidates, meeting clients, very much a giving role, helping, supporting, very performing, and very much supporting lots of people through a tricky career change time. So very much a giving role.
And so you were falling asleep on the train on the way home?
Falling asleep
you were getting
on the way
home.
in, getting home absolutely exhausted.
Okay.
And during the work, when I look back, I wasn't firing on all cylinders. I was finding it a bit more tricky than I had before. But I was dealing with, multiple roles. So, and it really was juggling. And I just didn't feel that I was quite juggling at the pace that I could juggle before.
I understand. Yeah.
I'd kind of slightly lost my juggling skills, but I was battling through anyway.
And I guess that was very much your kind of achiever kind of pattern. It's like,
yes.
I got to keep going.
Yes.
As opposed to, I guess some people, their body would give them symptoms like that, and they'd go, hang on, something's not right. I need to take some time to be with this and to rest. But yours was push through.
Absolutely. Override those feelings because they're weak, and as an achiever,
shouldn't be feeling human
like
things.
That. No, absolutely.
So how did things move from that? Like what happened next?
Well, during that year, I was confused because I didn't know what was going on. So I didn't. Throughout that whole year, I must say, I still didn't really know what it was until probably towards the end of that year. So I tried some things. I had an acupuncturist who was local to me. Actually, a friend's dad found her for me because I didn't have the energy to think about things like that myself.
And that's one of the things that's often really challenging. At the time we most need to find ways forward, we don't have the resources to do the research and to kind of seek things out.
So I had some acupuncture, which I remember took me from no energy to a little energy. 5-minute walk would take me 20 minutes walk, and covered in sweat when I got there because it was just so difficult. Coming back was a lot easier. The 5-minute walk was more of a 5-minute walk. So it helped sort of...
So you had a noticeable difference between before and after?
I did. But I think it was a noticeable difference from no energy to a little bit of energy.
Yeah,
so I only ever felt like the acupuncture was just pushing me up to...
From 0
10%.
to 10.
Maybe 10%.
1, sorry.
Yes, that's right. And then I dropped back down fairly soon. I tried Chinese medicine. I tried going back to the gym because I thought, maybe if I exercise more, that'll help.
How did that work out?
It wouldn't work out particularly well, actually. I mean, in a way, the hormone rush I got from exercise, it made me feel good because as an achiever, I was doing something. It was a tangible thing that I was doing. But it didn't really help. I was going to the doctors quite often. I was saying to them that this can't be right. They were doing blood tests. The blood tests kept coming back and them saying, there's nothing wrong with you. So it was a very frustrating, tiring year. And as you said, when you don't have the energy, it's very difficult to know really what to do, how to do it, what conversations to have with whom. So that was the year. But I think by the end of that year, it's quite difficult to remember the exact dates, but I must have read something which led me to think, this ME thing looks familiar.
And how when you got that reference point, was that because sometimes it can be a relief, other times it's feels like a curse. People have very different reactions to kind of getting a label. How was that for you?
I think it was a bit of both, actually. It took another 6 months for the doctors to acknowledge that I had it. So it was still more my own diagnosis, really. But I actually rang the ME Association and spoke to a very nice lady there who was very helpful. And I seem to remember, again, it was all a bit of a blur, but there was a list that I could download from their site which gave me some things that you should ask the doctor. Okay. So it was almost like a checklist that you say to the doctor, look, please read this. Please do these tests because this is what I think I might have. Yes. It was really helpful, actually. Yes. So I did, until I got the proper diagnosis or the doctors agreed it was that, I don't think I felt like I'd actually got an answer. I think I was still sort of wondering if that's what I had really. Yes. Still questions.
And so you got the diagnosis, so you got a kind of clarification, let's say. Where did you? Because of course, one of the things that's most frustrating about you get a diagnosis of chronic fatigue, and it feels a bit like, what's wrong with you? You've got chronic fatigue. I know I'm chronically tired, but what's wrong with me? Like, it doesn't really tell you why you've got the symptoms that you've got.
And I remember that when they did the diagnosis, they offered me some counselling, but it was at a hospital 40 miles away. And it was only going to be half an hour. And I thought, that's...
80-mile round trip for half an hour.
To try and get there in my state was going to be very difficult. Yeah. I was very lucky, so I thought, right, what can I do about this myself, being the achiever that I am?
Proactive, yeah.
Yes, so I found a book called 50 Recovery Stories.
Yeah, Alex Barson,
Exactly.
Really good book, yeah.
Fantastic.
I think it's called CFS Recovery, 50 Stories.
50 Stories.
Yeah.
And I thought, brilliant, if there's 50 people recovered...
That's a start.
That's a great start. And I think subconsciously I thought they must have all done the same thing. So I thought, well, I'll buy the book. They'll have all done the same thing. I'll just do that.
Yeah.
And that
Of course, what's interesting is I was saying at the start of the interview, there are different paths. And what I like about that book is it shows different paths that people have followed. Yeah.
Which is not what I wanted.
Right.
I wanted the same path.
Simple answer,
I wanted a simple answer, which I thought I might get. So I read it through once and thought, right, okay, this is interesting. And I read it through the second time, and I went through with my highlighter and my biro and picked out anything that was a common theme.
Oh, clever.
Because interestingly, some people had recovered through one approach.
One modality,
so maybe for one person, Chinese medicine had done the job.
Yes.
And maybe for another person, meditation had done the job. For others, it was definitely a lot more complicated than that. But having underlined and highlighted, one of the common themes was mention of the Optimum Health Clinic. But I believe when the book was put together, the clinic was in its infancy.
It was. It's funny. I remember. I mean, it's relevant to your story. But I remember talking to Alex Barson when she was putting it together, and it must have. I can remember where I was sat. So it must have been back in 2004 that it was happening, and she was very clear in her vision that she wanted to illustrate this point of different stories, different things happening, different people. We were in our first year. We were literally just starting out.
Yeah.
And so
it wasn't that anybody had said, this is what I did at Optimum Health Clinic, but there were several people saying, I've heard about Optimum Health Clinic and this is something we should look into. So I thought, well, I'm going to look into that then. And the other thing was I tried the acupuncture and I knew it'd taken me to there.
Yes.
I tried the Chinese medicine and it didn't do much. I tried, at that stage, I'd also tried doing some Pilates, and luckily I found a Pilates teacher who'd had chronic fatigue herself, which was marvellous.
Wow.
So she really understood how I was feeling when I walked in looking like death. And so I tried that, and I felt that had got me to 10%. I was thinking, I could be years trying these individual things. So it was the holistic approach. And when I thought, hang on a minute, if I can go somewhere with a holistic approach, it must be worth doing. It must be worth starting with that umbrella view than trying to keep picking away at different things over the years, because I thought this could take me years, and I didn't want to spend years recovering.
I understand. You wanted to live your life, not spend it trying to get better.
Yes, I mean, that's just after then I had to give up working because I couldn't.
How was that? So kind of someone that, it sounds like somewhat had defined yourself by your career and your achievements, to have to acknowledge that you couldn't keep pushing through.
It was awful. It's one of the most upsetting things I've ever been through because my whole identity had gone and I didn't know what I was anymore or who I was.
And an identity you'd worked hard to build up as well.
Yes, I was a hard-working career person. You know, I had a really successful career in marketing and business development. I worked in big law firms. I'd been posted overseas twice. I'd taken on big roles, achiever type, pushed myself to the limit. But I was known as the hard-working career girl and partied hard as well. That was my life. I found the having to give up work extremely hard. I found it very upsetting, and actually it probably upset me until fairly recently. So it's taken a good couple of years.
Was there a part of you which felt a relief at not having to keep up the facade and keep pushing, or was it primarily just this feeling that you were losing a sense of identity?
Now I have relief, but that's taken me a long time to come to terms with. And there are still days where it's like I'm grieving for the old person, because the old person felt good because I was working in the biggest law firm and I was a senior manager and I had managed a team in Asia, and I'd done all the things that I thought made me something great, Hadn't looked after myself, hadn't nurtured myself really at all. So it really was a grieving for that. And then what am I?
If I'm not this.
If I'm not that, what am I? What do I tell people? How do I relate to people? And I even felt that my relationships with some people, they changed.
I'm sure.
Because to them, I wasn't the person I was. I mean, I wasn't the person going out and having a good time because I couldn't go out. I couldn't stay awake. I could hardly go out, So I wasn't the party on the dance floor to the end of the night person either. And I guess some people in my circle of friends wanted me to be that.
Sure.
Because I wasn't that anymore.
Then that's who they knew you as.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So for me, it was really hard. Yeah, really hard.
And so what happened in terms of your recovery from there? So you stopped work.
So I signed off from work for 4 weeks.
Okay, 4 weeks initially.
It was a real crash moment. I was staying at my boyfriend's, and bless him, Ian's been with me the whole time that I've been ill.
But interesting, you mentioned before we started filming, you met him once you were already ill, which is quite beautiful
incredible.
That he's kind of met you in that place and supported you through.
I'd say that I'm very fortunate. I think Ian's one of the key reasons why I've fully recovered. To have somebody who, he's never questioned, never. Number of times we've not gone out and he's had to just watch me asleep on the sofa, or I've fallen asleep halfway through a conversation. Can't be good for your ego, really, can it? But bless him, no, he's been absolutely amazing and very supportive, and it has made a difference. But this particular Sunday, I was at his house, and I was asleep most of that weekend, and on the Monday morning I was getting up for work, and I literally couldn't physically open my eyes.
It was kind of reached a point where just pushing through was just not an option.
There was nothing left, nothing at all. I couldn't talk, I couldn't. So Ian had to call my dad and say, I think you need to come and pick her up. He was working, he couldn't not work. Mum and Dad enjoyed their early retirement by having me back moving in with them. Not quite what they planned.
Strived all their lives.
Oh, yes, just to have me back in the house in my late 30s. So I had the 4 weeks signed off. Then I went back to work. And during that period of time was when I fortunately managed to get in to do the 90-day programme.
Right.
In that 4-week period.
Because you'd read Alex Barton's book.
Exactly, read that, done my 15-minute talk, decided with the lady who I spoke to, whose name I can't remember, I'm sorry, that the 90-day programme would work for me. For you, So came down here into this room.
Sat probably around there somewhere.
Somewhere around there somewhere, yes, feeling really unhappy. And then I went back to work part-time, assuming that I would be okay. But it was fairly soon afterwards that I realised that, having decided I was finally going to nurture myself and get myself back to something normal, that actually trying to do this really stressful work probably, it was just counterproductive.
If you wanted your recovery to happen, you had to make it the number one thing, which is often the thing that's so difficult because you mentioned earlier kind of achiever and helper pattern before we started to kind of filming. But when you've got the helper pattern, part of what's really, any achiever pattern, but especially the helper pattern, part of what's really hard is to make ourselves the priority. And we're so used to being this identity of helping others and doing things. And to make your recovery the most important thing is often an absolute necessity, but it's difficult for people to do that. Practically difficult, but also emotionally difficult.
Very, and I still find that hard now. The putting myself first thing I find very difficult. I sometimes, I still get those guilty feelings, or I'm just indulging in myself, because that's just how I was for so many years. So it was a tough decision, but it was necessary. I wasn't performing in my job. I couldn't.
You couldn't be the achiever anymore anyway.
I couldn't. I wasn't achieving. I was letting myself down. I felt I was letting clients and candidates down. My cognitive ability was just not there. Sometimes I would be interviewing somebody and not really being able to understand what they were telling me.
Yes.
I could hear the words, but my brain couldn't process what those words meant. I couldn't carry on like that.
I understand. I understand. And so you came and you did the 90-day program. How was that? And you can be honest. So it might have been sometimes, obviously I know it helped you, but initially were you cynical and skeptical? Were you open? Did it have an impact straight away? Was it a slow burn? Like what was your experience?
I had a few major light bulb moments. Walking in, there was 8 of us, 6 of whom had ME for a long, long time.
Right.
And some of them were showing serious physical symptoms as well. So my initial impression was, gosh,
is this where I am?
Look where I am. Yeah. How on earth did I get here? And also with my helper patterns, I was upset for them and desperate that I could help them as well. I didn't want to see anyone in that situation. The 90-day program, for me, there was 2 or 3 major light bulb moments, which really, as far as I can see, kickstarted my recovery. one major one was that about my inner critic. And I remember Jess, who was our course leader, talking about our inner critic, how we talk to ourselves. And she said, now think about how you talk to yourself. Would you talk to a 5-year-old child like that? I'm thinking, gosh, no, because that would just be so awful. And then she said, so why do you talk to yourself like that? Big light bulb moment for me. I thought, I've pretty much spoken to myself like this for as long as I can remember. This constant, you're not good enough, you're not working hard enough, you're not being successful enough.
Which is what, of course, drives the achiever and the helper.
And I've often asked managers who've said to me, you're taking this all too seriously, Katherine, you're pushing yourself too hard. But I've often asked them, I don't know how to keep striving without that. Yes. I've never known how I could achieve in life without having that very negative, nagging voice.
Yeah. I mean, let alone how you was taught to a small child. Most people wouldn't talk to their worst enemy like that. The level of ongoing self-criticism and self-judgment that often is there for people. And it's like when you start to really, it can be quite shocking when you start to see what you've normalized to in terms of how you are with yourself and how you treat yourself.
And I still do it. It's still my core value set that I have to override and work with the whole time. It's still there. It's ready to come out whenever it wants to.
But I imagine it's quieter, and I imagine you have more awareness around
I'm aware of it.
Right.
It is quieter. I'm aware of it, and I can talk back to it now as well. Good. In my own way, in my own head. No one will ever know. Not walking along the path,
Suddenly develop Tourette's.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So that was a massive learning point for me.
So there were a couple of things.
There was, and actually then I was trying to remember the second one, and I don't have brain fog anymore, so I can't use that as the excuse that I used to.
But what I'm also curious is in the kind of recognition and the awareness that kind of happened, how did that impact on your actual symptoms? So the kind of the fatigue and the kind of the fact that you were so ill you weren't able to work at this point. And it's one thing to see that you're criticizing yourself and you're judging yourself and start to get some distance and quietening of that. But it sounds like that had an impact on your actual physical health as well. So talk us through that.
Well, what I was like then, or how I then used that for recovery.
How it impacted your recovery.
So recovery was not as fast as I wanted it to be.
It rarely is, I'm afraid.
Being the achiever.
Certainly lasting recovery is not
and actually, in a way, I think the following 18 months was almost harder than the really bad points, because you get a sense that you're recovering and therefore you just want to be recovered.
Yes.
And that recovery then seems to take forever. It did for me. I know everyone's different, but for me it seemed to take forever.
It can be very frustrating when you get a taste.
Yes,
you get like a few hours, you get an hour or a few hours where you feel normal and you go, oh my, like suddenly feeling normal feels like amazing. Like I feel normal. And then it goes away again.
Exactly.
And that can be incredibly frustrating for people.
Yeah.
And then you feel, sorry to interrupt, you feel better for a bit. So you start trying to do all the things you want to do, and then the symptoms come back and get you because you've done too much too quickly. That can be very frustrating.
And I had some of that. I would say for so I went to then live with my parents in their early retirement for 4 months. And during that time, I'd say that physically my symptoms improved, but slightly. I was sleeping a lot. I mean, I feel like I was probably sleeping for the last 20 years.
I mean, sounds like we talk about 3 stages of recovery and that there are videos we put out there people can look at, but it sounds like you were very much in stage 1, which is the crash stage, which is defined by needing a great deal of sleep. And the only, the critical ingredient to move from stage 1 to stage 2 is to allow that rest. But that's difficult if you're an achiever and a helper and you keep fighting it. So it sounds like that a part of the big transition for you was actually giving yourself permission to feel the tiredness and do the resting that needed to be done. And
my mum and dad live in a tiny village in the middle of, they're near Cambridge, but they're in the middle of nowhere. I remember it was quite a sunny summer there, and they've got a lovely swing seat in the garden. Beautiful. So, and they were wonderful and cooked and looked after me and made me feel like I did when I was a kid, made me feel safe again. And it did help. I was very fortunate with that. So I was fortunate with Ian, I was fortunate with my parents doing that as well. So I did have permission, almost from them and from myself, to just sleep. I didn't have any choice, really, to be honest. But
the choice you had was the longer you'd fought it, the worse it would have got.
Yeah.
And you fought it quite hard by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
So you could have fought it harder, which would have made it even worse.
Yeah.
And it sounds like eventually there was enough awareness. Partly you had no choice, but partly there was an awareness that I have to honor my body and I have to listen. That it needs sleep. Fighting it is not getting me anywhere. I have to allow my body to have the rest that it needs to have.
Yeah. So I read your book.
Okay.
And went through that. I think I read that twice, actually, because I was, again, just keen to get inspiration from other places. I was doing my meditation, which I'd picked up. And actually, when I look back, for quite some years, I'd been intrigued by meditation. There's something in my mind that thought, I bet this would be good for me. I kind of knew that deep down this would probably help, but never really got round to doing it.
Yes.
And it was always this thing that you had to learn to do. I always thought it was something that you had to be skilled, of course.
Thing, yeah.
And we did a bit of meditation on the 90-day program.
Yes.
And I realised, no, actually, this feels amazing. And I just want more of that. So I obviously used the CDs, did a lot of meditation, did bits of yoga, spent lots of time on that swing seat, getting some sun again, not being stuck in an office over a laptop.
Just feeling grounded.
I think
probably
my lungs opened up a bit,
Sure,
and I just generally felt I had more oxygen and felt I could breathe. So that was a 4-month period where I don't remember having massive energy, but I was going to see a wonderful lady in Cambridge called Rachel Hawes, who had ME herself and fibromyalgia. And she did a sort of Pilates yoga mix with me, which really helped. Some really basic movements. I mean, when I think where I've come from now, because now I'm a nutrition coach and a personal trainer.
I was going to say, so personal training is like a whole other level from...
So when I think back, I was sort of, lying on my foam roller and just doing that.
Mastering Shavasana or corpse pose.
Exactly, that's what I was doing. But it helped, it really did help. So I did feel that over those 4 months I was getting slightly more energy. I was able to have more conversations, not any real socialising going on. Then Ian and I moved up to Chester. We decided that both of us felt that London had done us good, but maybe not done me particularly good.
Done us bad.
Yes, exactly. He was working in the city as well. I'd also had a very busy career, lived abroad, worked very hard. And we decided that actually for us both, it would be lovely to get away from London, and probably the thing I needed to get away from perhaps what had in some way caused my problems. So we chose Chester slightly randomly. Won't bore you with the story. And then over that year, I was still not working. So again, fortunately, Ian not only psychologically and emotionally looked after me, but also financially, practically enabled me to have some time again, and was very encouraging of me doing nothing. This was very alien to me.
I understand that,
and I think without him doing that, the chances are I could have slipped back into old patterns. So again,
especially what can be very difficult is when energy starts to return. It's like we want to use it, and that takes a great deal of discipline. When you move from stage 1 to stage 2, stage 3, to actually let your recovery be more important than what you do. Because often what we tend to do is define our recovery by how much we do that day, which may mean we're defining our recovery by how much we're overdoing it, as opposed to measuring it by how much healing's actually taking place.
Yeah.
And the energy needs to be used for healing, not just doing activity.
Yeah, and it was a difficult year. I was trying to recover, and the trying was filling my bucket up, as I remember, on the course before I'd even started. So my bucket was probably half full before I'd even got out of bed, because I was already thinking, well, I've got to be better than I was yesterday. And so that achiever stuff is really ingrained. But over that year, given the time and the space, I started to explore the food side of things as well, which is how I've ended up doing what I'm doing now. And actually, I had at one point been diagnosed with IBS. Because obviously my digestive system was completely shot as well.
I'm not surprised after everything you've described.
So one of the doctors said I had IBS, and the IBS diet is so nutritionally poor. sort of...
I better be careful about no comment for legal reasons, but yes.
White bread and all these other things. So, and I was on that for a while. And then it came to me and I thought, I did a lot of reading. I mean, all sorts of books, anything I could get my hands on to read and try and learn. And I was coming across some blogs where, talking about the value of good nutrition. Mm-hmm. So that's when I started eating all natural food. I cut out all stimulants. So I cut out all sugar, caffeine, alcohol. Mm-hmm. I actually cut out wheat and dairy as well, because obviously they're quite hard on the digestive system. Sure. And I think I'd had problems with wheat for quite some time anyway. And I went on a very all-natural, healthy diet. And it contributed enormously to my energy levels picking up.
And it's interesting, sometimes people make much more complicated nutritional changes in terms of supplements and all that, but sometimes simply just changing what you eat, something as simple as that can make a big, big difference for people.
Just taking out the stimulants, I think, made a massive difference. Now I understand why, because the stress that they were putting on my body, that sort of maladaptive stress response, that was just fueling that to continue.
Totally.
Whereas
you can have anxiety, which is biologically induced. You put too many stimulants in, the body can't handle it, and you feel wired. But it's as much down to what you've eaten and what you haven't eaten.
That's right.
As opposed to what's happening psychologically sometimes.
And I realised I wasn't eating enough. I was working really hard. I was under a lot of stress. I was trying to stay slim, which and that's
no achiever passing.
Exactly. So I was, not eating too much, and
probably not eating enough. Sometimes.
No, I wasn't. I eat loads now. I eat tons. I just eat all of the good stuff. So that really helped, and I carried on doing the meditation. The lady Rachel I mentioned actually carried on helping me via Skype. So I had some sessions with her to just help me through the kind of grieving process of not being career woman.
Yeah.
We'd moved to Chester. I did know some people there, but I found once I started getting a bit better, I started feeling really lonely. More lonely than when I'd been very ill.
Because you could go out, but you didn't have people to go out with.
Well, I didn't have a job to do, and I didn't have a purpose. That was the big thing. No purpose. I felt really uncomfortable not having a purpose. Yes. But I didn't have enough energy to have a purpose.
I know, I understand. You could feel there was something that was absent, that was missing, but there wasn't the energy to go and resolve that and to do something with it.
So I played the cello, so I'd managed to join an orchestra up there, but I found the evening rehearsals really challenging, and then the whole of the next day I'd be wiped out.
Yes.
At least that gave me a little bit of a purpose.
Something to look forward to.
Something to look forward to. I did some bits of walking. But what I did do was I started my first sort of nutrition-related blog, a Facebook page called What Katherine Eats, which was basically pictures of all the food I ate. And it was...
a good motivation, I imagine.
Well, it was. It was, in a way. It held me accountable.
Yeah.
But also, friends started asking me questions because they could see that I was recovering.
Yes.
So people were starting to take note and saying, well, what have you done? And when I'd explain the stuff around the psychology and the meditation and the inner critic didn't necessarily resonate with a lot of people. When I mentioned the food, of course, everyone immediately wants to know, well, what do you eat? Yeah. And still now, everyone asks me, what do you eat? Because they want the magic answer. Yeah. Well, if you have one courgette a day, you'll be perfect.
An apple a day keeps the doctor away, apparently.
It's not quite as simple as that. So I suppose I started it to share it with friends, but then people I didn't know started following it because I was saying, look, this has helped me boost my immune system, And it gave me a purpose.
Yes.
And I really
And it gave you some contact with people.
Some contact, some communication, some feedback, made me feel like I was worth something. And it helped keep us on track as well with food. So that was a big change year. There was some real lows and some real highs. But the recovery took way longer than I wanted it to.
Okay, and so, but it sounds like a lot of really wonderful things happened in that time. It just wasn't quite the agenda that you had, but nonetheless, the healing took place. Yeah. And so, what was the point where you really knew you were coming to the other side? Like, were there kind of certain benchmarks, certain kind of things that when you reached those points that they were kind of illustrative of where you'd got to for you?
Yeah, a few people have asked me this, and there's nothing that I'm really aware of, and actually other people might notice it.
Yes.
So if I asked Ian, he might say,
It was
actually,
that
do you
time we
remember?
did, yeah.
I can remember a lot of things we didn't do because I couldn't, but
Sure.
it's easy to remember those. I mean, it was just a gradual thing. There was an ability to walk, and then, I mean, I love country walks, absolutely love them. So I was able to do a country walk and not feel too
And not be wiped out for
exhausted
3 days. Yeah.
for 3 days. Or I could go out for the evening and socialise, not drink, but still be there for a couple of hours and be able to communicate. So it was more gradual. For me, there was no big moments. But once I got to a certain point, the rest of the recovery seemed to really speed up, because over the next few months, I suddenly decided that I was going to study to be a nutrition coach, which I did with Precision Nutrition. And trained to be a personal trainer. So,
Which of course involves going to a gym and exercising and all of that. And you also had the energy to do that.
Exactly.
Do you know what happened in those few months? Like, was it just you reached a certain point where there was a resilience that was there? Or was there any particular mindset shift or physical thing that you changed?
I think maybe acceptance. Maybe I'd finally accepted where I was.
Yeah, so you weren't constantly trying to get ahead of where you were, therefore you could actually settle. Yeah.
I'd let go of the need to identify so much with the past. Therefore, I could look to being something else, maybe. Yes. That was probably one thing. I guess there was just a general sense that life was becoming more normal again, and I was becoming
whatever that is. Of course.
I know. I don't like that word really.
But I know what you mean. You had the energy to do the normal things in life.
Yeah. So, and I suppose, I think it got to a point where I was still believing that I couldn't do as much as I actually could do.
Right.
And again, I know I keep mentioning Ian, and he's watching this, so he might be a bit embarrassed, but he has been very critical in this. And I suppose the message that might help for other people, because it's all very well. I'm not going to loan Ian out to anyone.
Is he not available for rent?
No, he's not. Definitely not. We're getting married in 2 months' time. I'm keeping hold of him. Yes,
you can probably charge a good rate.
There's business opportunity there, isn't there?
It's not like me to miss out on a joint venture.
There you go. But he seemed to instinctively know with me when to push me, and then when I also needed to rest.
Yes.
He just seemed to know. So I remember it got to a point where I was holding back, saying, I can't do that, I can't do that. He was saying, no, you can do this. And he was right.
Yes.
So it took a bit of...
And it sounds like he wasn't pushing you. What he was doing was inviting and encouraging.
No, it was encouraging.
You. Yeah.
But he could sense that when I said, I don't think I should go out because I'm going to be tired, he'd say, I think you can do it. And I could. So it did. I mean, I'm not going to give him all the credit.
It sounds like he's played a really fundamental role, and
has.
you've also done the work as well, and it's been a team effort.
It has been a team effort,
and not everyone has that support. When people do, it makes a big difference, and when they don't, what people have to learn to do is to find that way to support themselves. And just like you were saying, there's times to take the pressure off and times to give some gentle encouragement, and we can also learn to do that for ourselves. And that can be part of people. And you did learn that, and so we have to learn that even more if we haven't got another person. And it's great when we have people around us that support us.
But I think what helped that process was that I was very honest with him, and I shared pretty much everything I'd learned on the 90-day program with him, which, there's some stuff in there that can sound a bit weird and wacky to people.
I'm not also aware of that.
I mean, come on, let's all tap together. Not everyone's embracing of that stuff.
I didn't know
it's
that.
Funny. Yeah, just look on Twitter for half an hour. You'll soon work it out. But so I suppose I made that happen by sharing and I suppose asking. So.
Making him part of it.
Exactly, and it did make a difference. Yeah, and I have been very open to personal development over the years, so I suppose that helped. I was very open to sharing it and asking him to support me. So so then it was just a kind of complete.
But like a rocket at the end.
It was a real rocket once I thought, actually, I have got the energy.
Yeah. And what's it like now? You're working as a kind of nutrition coach and personal trainer, and you're getting married in June, and you're just moving house. I think you were saying before we went on air. So your life is full. Let's say. What's it like to be able to do those things and enjoy doing them?
It's amazing. It's more amazing than it was before I was ill, of course, because I know where I've come from. And actually, sometimes I think already, perhaps I forget how fortunate I am, and I need to remind myself. But there are some times when I'm walking in the countryside and I'll go, I can't believe I'm going to say this on air, I might go and hug a tree or touch a tree maybe or something. Yeah. I'm just so delighted to be out doing stuff.
And to be able to enjoy doing it rather than live in fear of how you're going to feel at the end of it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I really don't take it for granted. And I there's a walk I'm doing in a few weeks' time where actually, sadly, we were at school with a friend and she lost her life in November to cancer. So there's a group of 9 of us doing a big walk in aid of her in a few weeks' time. Again, it's a half a marathon, and I can do it. Yeah. And I was walking with a couple of friends doing a training walk, and I suddenly just did The Hills Are Alive with the Sound of Music because I thought, I can do this. There's that much elation. Yeah. It is wonderful. It is wonderful. Now, I'm still managing my energy.
No, I understand.
I'm still managing my energy. I'm still eating what I eat and what I tell all my clients to eat because it's real, natural food and it works.
Also walking your talk.
I'm walking my talk. One of the things
I don't come off air and go to McDonald's. It's like there's a certain integrity.
No, it is an integrity, but it's more than that. It's what I want to be doing. Yeah. It's what makes you feel great. Eating great food, nutritious food,
and
makes you feel
your body.
Exactly. It's a form of nurturing, isn't it? I'm saying to myself that I'm worth this great food, and that and it feels great. So, where were we?
So we were talking about what's it like to be on the other side and to be well and to be able to do
yes, as I was saying, though, I still have to manage. I do still have to manage. So I still have to, I still want to eat the food. I still do keep an eye on my energy levels. I make sure I sleep well at night. I don't take on too much. I try not to take on too much stress, although moving house,
getting married, new business.
Running my own business, there's a lot there.
But in a sense, what you're illustrating is you've learnt the lessons from being ill, which is the reason why you burnt out. Yeah. Is because you didn't take care of those things.
That's right.
And when people sometimes have relapses, and when they have relapses, it's nearly always because they've forgotten the lessons. Yeah. And it's not that you have to be careful to protect your recovery, but if you've gone back and lived in all the ways you lived before you got ill, there's a pretty good chance you're going to recreate the same thing. Yeah. So there's a way on the other side of not being obsessive and having to be careful all the time, but of taking care of yourself, because that's what it means to live as a healthy, vibrant, optimally well person. And
I never want to go back to how I was. That time when my dad had to come and pick me up, and I can just remember it. You just don't want to go back there. So whatever it takes, I will carry on doing, so that I do whatever's in my means to not go back there. Yeah,
well, we're pretty much out of time, but just as a kind of closing thing, when you look back on the years that you've been ill and what's happened, what's the lesson or lessons that you take from that? Like, what would you say to that you that was kind of being picked up by your dad, from on a Monday morning, unable to kind of move to go to work? When you look back on that, what have you learned from all of this?
I've learnt to spread the word to other people, not to put work or career or supposed written achievements before living for yourself and nurturing yourself. So even when I'm working with clients on nutrition, actually, it's a lot about life in general. Sure. And the key thing I'm saying to them is live life to the full. Do what makes you happy. If you're in a job that's causing you stress, have a think, what else can you do? So I've learned that from now on, life will be how I want it to be. Yes. And if that means it's not a social norm or what I think was a social norm, it doesn't matter. To have balance, to take care of myself and to put myself first. And that doesn't mean that I don't think about other people, because I still do.
You put your own gas mask on, or whatever they call it, before you do something else.
And that's those are probably the big lessons I've learned. And if I'm no good, I'm no use to anybody else.
If you haven't got your oxygen mask, you're not going to be able to put it on someone else.
So I think they're the key lessons. And the food and the diet has been a big lesson.
Yeah.
For the rest of my life, I will nurture myself with food, and I'll try and make sure that everyone else does as much as possible as well. So.
Well, Katherine, thank you for spreading the word here tonight.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's wonderful to be back in this room in a different guise. So thanks, it's been great. And thank you to the Optima Health Clinic. It really did make a big difference, so thank you.
Glad we helped, but you did the work.
Yeah, thanks.
Hope you found that inspirational and useful. I think recovery is a complex thing, and there are many ingredients to that. I think it's worth reflecting on after watching Katherine's story. Do you have all the right ingredients in your recovery journey at this point in the process? And if not, perhaps what else do you need to be adding in? On Monday, it's Mindful Monday, and I'm going to have another guided meditation. And after a number of requests, I'm going to do a sleep meditation. This will be a meditation you can do lying in bed as you fall asleep, or a meditation that you can do before you go to bed to help prepare and calm your mind ready for sleep. So I look forward to talking with you on Monday.